Santosh, we're live now.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session for the Tinkerpreneur Bootcamp. In today's session, we have Santosh Kumar. He's had an interesting journey from IIT to INSEAD to now building products for Lyft. And in our session today, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session for the Tinkerpreneur.
I think someone's YouTube is on. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think we're good to start now.
Yeah.
So, in today's session, we'll learn more about business models. To start, I just wanted to quickly share this image with you, which to tell us about the journey we've had in Tinkerpreneur so far, starting from digital skills to building a product, refining it, and now to today creating a business model around it. And this is what really Santosh's session will focus on. It'll focus on the different components of creating a business model. How do you really think about your customers and earning revenue by selling your product to them or through different models that exist? So with that, Santosh, welcome to today's session and over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Varya, and thank you, Swati, for setting this up. And good morning, everyone, wherever you are. I think most of you are in India, so it must be good morning. So very bright good morning to all of you. I'm really thankful to Network Capital for giving me this opportunity, and a bigger thanks to ATL Innovation Mission, which has set this amazing platform for the young minds like yourself. And I'm really amazed. I was talking earlier with Varya about the kind of things that you have built, and I can't be more excited about this opportunity. This is a great opportunity for me too, because it actually, each time I give a session like this, it helps me understand the concepts a little better. And I invite you to ask me all the questions, express your comments and opinions, because they open another forum in my mind to kind of further refine my ideas or my understanding. So with that, I'll jump right in, and I plan to mostly do a whiteboard session today. Just a quick check. Varya, are you able to see my screen? Oh, not yet, probably. Let me just quickly share my screen, and then that we should be fine.
And just for the students adding in, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So as when you have questions, if there's anything else, please put it there and I'll be there to forward it to somebody.
So I'll start with this very quick agenda, and there are really not many things on the agenda, but each of these things are like pretty deep. So I'll start with a quick introduction about myself, and I'll try to kind of talk about my journey a little bit and explain what I do so that you guys can relate. And if some of you are building something in transportation or cab sharing or anything, probably even after this session, you can reach out to me. After that, we will basically jump into an overview of what business models are, and we'll spend maybe about 15 minutes on this, and then a little bit on the components and key aspects of business model. So basically, that's pretty much the agenda for today. As Varya said, feel free to basically ask any question, and we will pick them up, try to make it as interactive as possible. So very quickly about myself, I'm a product manager currently at Lyft. So I'll explain, and I actually build data and ML infrastructure. And Lyft, if you are not familiar with, is basically just like Uber and Ola in India. So it's an app-based taxi company which operates mostly in US and Canada. And roughly about 1 of every 3 rides on the app-based ecosystem in these 2 countries happen on this platform. So this is the second largest after Uber. The other thing is that I'm a product manager. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know about it, but imagine in the world before the digital world, there used to be manufacturing units and there used to be factories. And that's where products got produced. And there used to be somebody called a general manager. In the digital world or technology world, organizations have products, and effectively a product manager is a kind of equivalent of GM, general manager, who needs to worry about every aspect of the product, just like a general manager worried every aspect of his factory. However, there's a key difference though. Unlike GM, where if you create the organizational structure of the factory, everybody reports to GM, product managers operate in a slightly different way where people do not generally report to them. An engineering manager, an engineer reports to an engineering manager, a sales guy reports to a regional sales manager, or something like that. PMs have to have the leadership without the reporting structure under them, and that's what makes it interesting. We basically, as product manager, we have to worry about and own every aspect of the product, from vision to strategy, uh, to implementation, to growth, to any kind of support issues, documentation issues, and so on. But you do not have the direct reporting, which implies you have to exercise your leadership through influence. So I'll leave it at that, but pretty much, that's what kind of sums it. The last piece is data and ML infrastructure. What happens here? Well, the apps, any kind of apps that you build today, or almost anything that you do in the technology world or the digital world, it generates a lot of data. Probably all of you know it already. Now, in order to store and process this data, you need software, you need hardware, you need systems like databases and things like those. And similarly, for just keeping that data and then for building your machine learning or ML models. Today, when you open an app, there's a machine learning model working in the back to predict how long will it take for you to get a driver, for example. So there are all these machine learning models. I build the infrastructure to help people build the ML and AI systems behind it. So that's my job. Before Lyft, I used to be at another company called Cloudera. And before that, you might not have heard about that one. Before that, I was at Facebook, which is a data science. I was a data scientist over there. And before that, I was in India working in various companies in software engineering role. And between India and US, I did my MBA at a school in France called INSEAD. And prior to that, I had studied at IIT. I studied computer science engineering at IIT Kanpur. So that's pretty much about my professional life. The reason I went into the details of explaining what I do, so that in case any one of you need any insights or inputs, I love to share and assist you in any way I can. Apart from the professional life, I am a husband and a doting father of two daughters now, 3 years and 3 months old. I love to read, but rarely get time for it these days. And recently, my interest in chess has been resurrected, and I'm looking forward to attaining a 1500 rating in FIDE rankings. I'm sure many of you would have similar ratings and are smarter chess players than me. In case you are interested, I'm at 1250 right now. And finally, I'll just talk about my background before that. I was born and brought up in a city in Bihar called Bokaro Steel City. As long as I was there in that city, it was part of Bihar. I think a year or two after I left that city, it became part of Jharkhand. It was one of the best cities. It is indeed, and certainly was the best place to grow up in the late 1980s and 1990s in the whole world. I can say that. And if anybody is from Bokaro in the comment section of YouTube, please mention that, and hi to all of you. All right. So with that brief introduction, I will actually go ahead and jump now into the business model aspects. So let me talk about the business models. Now, first of all, if you ask two people, even professors of management in various schools, various renowned study schools, and they have written papers about it, no two opinions on business models are going to be identical. People define it very differently. So that's number one. So it's basically hard to define term. It means a little bit different for everybody. The second part is that a lot of these terms that you hear, business model, business strategy, value chain model, so on and so forth. Many of them are quite related and effectively are similar. So I'll try to stay away from that jargon. And don't get me wrong, this jargon does have a value. It often helps people think better and more clearly in a more focused way. And that's why these terms were created by these professors of management schools. However, for this conversation where I've tried to summarize a lot of things, I'll stay away from jargon and not think too much about these, the different shades of these terms and try to understand the business model in broad terms. Uh, as you can imagine, a lot of successful business people do not use these terms, do not even maybe are aware of these terms. If you look at some of the biggest businessmen of India, Dhirubhai Ambani, he probably never learned it. He just went to 10th grade or something like that, as far as I know. Azim Premji, somebody I've heard a couple of times in my professional career. He never talks in these kind of terms either. He tries to just do things simply and talks in most understandable terms. So don't worry too much about it to understand it well. What you need to understand better or what you need to understand well is effectively how to do business. And from that perspective, all that business model means at the core of it is effectively how do you plan to run your business and make money? So business model is, for all practical purposes, how do you plan to run or rather create and run your business and to make money? Because obviously we are all interested in for-profit businesses and businesses need money to run. So take, for example, I'll give you a couple of examples of business model. Let's take example of Microsoft, which I'm pretty sure many of you are aware of. And let's take the example of Office, MS Office product. What was the business model there? Well, the business model was that Microsoft will build a suite of products, software products. It will build Excel, it will build Word, it will build PowerPoint presentation, and so on and so forth. Pack it or bundle it together, and it realized that a lot of organizations as well as some persons will find this very, very valuable to buy. So what happened then? That it basically got a lot of software engineers who conceptualized, some product managers like me in a team, they conceptualized what these products would be. Then they hired probably hundreds of such people. Then they worked for probably many months or possibly for years. And then they built this product. Potentially after spending millions and millions of dollars. Once they did it, they now could put this software and a corresponding license on any storage medium. When it was started, I believe the most popular mediums were CD, eventually DVDs, now probably pen drives, and now also online. And if you imagine any of these medium and the cost of shipping would be a few dollars, $1 to $2. But Microsoft will charge from each such customer $100 to $200 for this license, and maybe more from the enterprises. So as long as Microsoft is able to make, if you do the rough calculation, if it is able to sell 10,000 or more copies of this software, it is breaking even. If it is selling more, it's making more money. Effectively, this is the business model of Microsoft MS Office org, so to speak. Now, this is like for the big tech companies, but if you look at it, it's not very different if you consider what is the business model of your next door Kirana store. So what they do is that they effectively do a similar thing. They actually go ahead and buy things in at wholesale rates. So suppose they bought 100 kg sack of rice. All that they do is that they get this in their shop and then they sell it in chunks of 2 or 3 kgs. And suppose they got it for 1000 rupees. So rupees 10 per unit, rupees 10 per kg. And then when they are selling it to the retail customers, they can charge 12 or 13 rupees per kg. And effectively, they make 200 rupees of profit in this transaction. So that's the business model of a Kirana store, where he basically buys it from a wholesale store, puts them together based on the customer, based on the neighborhood, based on their needs. And in the process, he charges a premium, and which is what it's their profit is. So a question arises now, why is it called a business model? Why is it not called a business, let's say, reality? Or why is it not called, let's say, business structure? And there's a good reason for that. And if I go back again to the Kirana store guy, imagine how he starts his business. Well, he first looks at the place where he has to open his store. And then he looks at what kind of customers. So he basically assumes the kind of customers that he will get in his store. If he happens to be in a rich neighborhood, then he expects richer customers who are going to pay a little bit extra. They don't mind it. The kind of products that they will choose will also be on the costlier side. So suppose there's detergent, then it's more likely that the people in this rich neighborhood are going to buy Surf Excel detergent powder, which when I last checked today morning, it came for rupees 150 per kg. But if he is in not so rich neighborhood, less rich neighborhood, then most likely people are going to be buying more of wheat, which comes at rupees 50 per kg. So he starts with this assumption as to the kind of customers that he will get. Not only that, once suppose he is indeed in a rich neighborhood, and he decides that, okay, in this rich neighborhood he is more likely to get people to ask for Surf Excel, so he needs to keep Surf Excel in his shop. But then the size of the store is limited, so he has to decide how many of Surf Excels he can keep. Now, if somebody comes in, if he just fits his entire store with only Surf Excel, probably nobody in this group here will like to go to that shop, because typically when we go to a shop, we don't go just for Surf Excel. We also want to buy some other soaps, we want to buy some groceries, maybe want to buy some cleaning material, and so on and so forth. So he has to decide about all the items that he wants to keep in his store. He has to decide about quantity of all of these things. And finally, for each of these items, he has to decide about the price. How much will people be willing to pay? In a rich neighborhood, probably he can increase and keep a slightly higher prices. In not so rich neighborhood, probably lower one. So all throughout, as you saw, he does not know things as such, and he has to make assumption, and based on that, how good his assumptions are or how bad they are, his shop's future is going to be like that. In contrast, if suppose he had some way of knowing that if I open my shop, then these are the 10 customers who are going to come to my shop, they will be willing to pay so much of price and they will be asking for this kind of items, then he did not need to make any assumptions, and therefore he did not have to think about modeling his business based on those assumptions. But that's not the reality, and therefore whenever somebody is effectively starting a business, one has to have a mental model of what that business is going to be. And therefore, a one basic workable definition of business model would be effectively that business model refers to the set of assumptions at a given point of time. And I'll come to that because this is important. To build a mental model, or you can call it maybe even understanding of the business a person is running, or if the person is running, to achieve her goals at that point of time again. All right. So the thing is that it's called a business model effectively because it's based on certain assumptions, and those assumptions create a mental model or understanding for the business person herself as to how to run that business. So one major takeaway is that from this thing, I hope it's clear, but I'll stress a few aspects, a few takeaways from that. That business model is not something like a uh, enlightening gyan or knowledge that one can just acquire by thinking hard and long about the business. A business model needs to be discovered. It is there somewhere. There is some model which will be very profitable or which will meet the goals of the business person, but it's not something that you just kind of get out by thinking, but in fact you discover it. And how do you discover it? You discover them through trial and error, through a lot of experiments. So that's one key takeaway from this one. The other takeaway that I will underscore, if that's not very clear, which I earlier referred to, is that basically assumptions that you make are valid for at a given point of time. These assumptions continuously change. Why do they change? Well, they change because your customers are people. People change all the time and their situation changes. Your customers can have change in income level. There can be changes in their product preferences. There can be differences in how they want to do shopping, how they want to pay, and so on and so forth. But apart from your customers, even the situation in which you are operating, that can change. There can be new shop coming in your area. Maybe there's a retail chain which has come. And all these factors, the competitive factors, the customers, all of these things will change. And therefore, whatever assumptions that you have made, those assumptions are valid at a point of time, but most likely they are not. And therefore, you have to continuously go ahead, reevaluate your assumptions and evolve them. And as a result, finally, the third takeaway is, therefore, your business model is not a static entity. Rather, its business model is itself an evolving entity or evolving thing. You have to keep evolving it. And in fact, my recommendation is that as somebody interested in running, you must consciously evolve it all the time. Otherwise, it becomes a stale, it's no longer valid, and your business might go in a negative direction. All right. So I'll now basically just give you the example of how the business model of this Kirana store guy might have evolved. In 1990s, for example, when this Kirana guy might have been running a shop, my dad had a Kirana shop at that point of time, so it's pretty close to, I know what we were doing. And at that point of time, there was a small shop, and then effectively a Kirana store person will go ahead and procure a few of things in the wholesale price, put it customers will come with their list of items that they want to buy. And the shopkeeper will actually look at the list of 10 items, and then he or she will say that, okay, I have number 1 to 7, 8, and 9 I don't have. 10 is the one I have. Okay, should I give all these things to you? And okay, these are the prices, and there may be some haggling of the prices, and then the deal is struck and they get their stuff. All right. In probably 2000s, if the business sustained itself and kind of was doing well, then it might have changed, and maybe this small shop became a larger shop. And at that point of time, probably you hired staff because customers do not want to wait, and you can handle only 1 or 2 customers at a time, so you need more people. You are becoming a bottleneck. So you made the shop larger. You had now staff that was helping you, and even after paying for your staff, you still had more profits. So that worked well. Now, in 210, the business might have evolved. The business owner might have seen that, okay, customers' behavior are changing. Big retail chains are coming up where there is no one-to-one thing that you come with a list and there is somebody who kind of gives everything in the list. In fact, it's better if the customers are put inside the shop, all the items are arranged in aisle, and in fact, people buy more things that way. Not only that, you don't have to spend so much of time on them. You only have to spend time on billing them once they have put all the things in the cart. The other change that might have happened is that customers no longer carry so much of cash, so you might have to start processing the credit card. So aisles, credit card, payment counters, credit cards were some of the things that evolved, and a new business model came because of that. And most recently in 2020s, probably what has happened is that the business owner might have realized that, well, fewer and fewer customers are coming to the shop. In fact, they are buying things online because there are a lot of startups which have come for home delivery or grocery buying. So in this case, she had to go ahead and onboard herself into one of those apps and start providing her goods on that platform in order to sustain that business. Those few customers who are still coming to the shop, their paying preferences have changed probably once again. They don't even want to pay using credit card. They want to pay using phone. So according to that, she might have started accepting like phone payments and home delivery through goods. So what we see here is that effectively, if the Kirana store wala had to survive, she had to continuously evolve her business through all these decades. And if she does it well, she kind of survives and does well and grows. Most likely, a lot of small Kirana storekeepers did not survive this. They could not make this transition. And in fact, just like those who survived this whole transition, if you want to have a successful business, then as a smart business person, you need to identify the upcoming trends in customer behavior, upcoming trends in technology, and in fact, go ahead and get ahead of the competition to reap the benefits of these trends. Only then you will do better. And this is, the underlying theme around it is that if you're running a business, look for these trends, identify them early on, latch onto them early on, then you will be running most likely a successful business. Otherwise, you are very likely to perish. All right. So next, I'll stop for a moment here. Varya, do you have any questions in the chat window or something that catches your attention that I can kind of explain more, or should I go to the next section?
I think there's just one question, but I think this would eventually get covered in the next section, which is, sir, will the annual price strategy, a lot like how Microsoft has adopted, will that become disadvantageous over time? So there was one question that was there that was interesting. The others were slightly more broad-based, which is just what are the different components of a business model? And one was on business strategy. But I think first we could probably go over the other sections that we have and come back to these questions at the end. They're still not
Got it. Sounds good. So I'll park them for now. I'll try to come back to each one of them. Yeah, and Varya, if you can kind of copy or keep it like, I mean,
Yeah,
I know
I'll
that
put
Catherine will scroll, so yeah,
questions. Yeah.
I might need the questions again. But good questions. Thanks a lot. These are very, very good questions. In fact, some of these things I already have covered in this slide, but I'm happy to answer those questions in more detail. So I think one of the questions was indeed about the components of business model, Varya. Is that right? Okay. Anyway,
Yes,
so I
that is
guess
correct. Yeah.
okay. So that's a perfect segue to talk about the components of business model because that's exactly what my next section was about to focus on. So first and foremost, the key component of your business model, or in fact your business overall, is customers. Customers are at the center, at the root, whatever you want to call it, uh, of your business. And what you need to do is to effectively focus on your customer and focus very, very narrowly. Uh, you need to figure out who your customers are and what do they value. And in the same vein, also call out who are not your customers. And this is important because when you actually build an app or a solution or a service and you go around trying to sell it to people or go for funding or for any interaction, you will almost invariably hear like, hey, there's a bigger section of customer that you are not focusing on. And this is, highly tempting early on when you're trying to sell something to start focusing on that section, a larger section, potentially large number of customers. uh, because you folks are mostly interested in digital product and service. So I'll try to create an example and try to explain all the components through that example. So let's create an example app. And let me call it an app for best notes. Yeah. So what does this app do is that in this app, you allow and you basically define your customers as the 50 students in your class. Let's just assume that's your customer base. You say that the 10 top students of the class can actually upload their notes on a specific topic, let's say trigonometry, onto this app. Now, remaining 40 students will get to see a section of this note, let's say one page, and based on that, they rank these notes. And therefore, at the end of the day, you have a ranked list of notes on trigonometry. So you have the best trigonometry notes available for the entire class. Potentially at this point, you can charge for these notes. And whatever money you collect for making the best notes available. So most likely, some of these 40 students, they haven't gotten their notes in the best shape. They probably were absent for some reason. Maybe they were traveling, maybe they were sick, or they did not pay attention, or they're just plain lazy, potentially like me, and they did not have the best notes. So some of them will be willing to pay. So they pay you, they get these notes, and once you get that payment, a part of it you can pass to these students and a part you can keep, and that's your profit. So that's effectively your business model. Now, that question is very, very important as to how to charge your customers, right? Now, there are various options. Now, suppose, I mean, I'll give you a few examples, and there are like, as many examples as you can imagine. So let's say you want to charge a one-time price of rupees 100 for your app. And now you know that it's a very high charge. And based on your understanding of the students of your class, with whom you are quite close, you study together, you play together, you have partied together, you have visited their homes, you probably know about the amount of pocket money that many of them get. You know that probably 3 students are going to buy this, and therefore you will end up with 3,000 rupees of revenue. Part of it, now again, the second question I'm ignoring, how do you decide how much you keep and how much you give to the students who have provided their notes? But let's assume that we'll worry about it later. So this is one way of charging, and it yields you 3,000 rupees. A second approach could be that let's charge less money, only 200, so that more students are going to be able to buy it because this is much more reasonable amount. And let's assume that 20 students at this point of time are willing to buy your app. So in this case, you ended up with 4,000 rupees in revenue. A third way could be that you give it free. So the app itself is free. However, for each note, you charge rupees 4 for every note that a person buys. Now, what you can also assume reasonably well is that every note will get sold on an average to 20 students, and there would be at least about 100 notes which will become available in the course of the year. Now, if you multiply all these things, then most likely you will end up with rupees 10,000. And by the way, this is yearly. Every year you will earn so much of money. This is like, lifetime revenue, so to speak. So clearly this model is the best one among all the models that you probably, among all these 3 models that we have in front of us over here. Now, let's assume that you actually adopted this model, and in fact, you ended up with more money. You ended up with 12,000 rupees in the first year of operation. Why? Because most likely more than 20 students bought your notes, more than 100 notes were available to you. That's a very good situation to be in. Now, the important thing to notice here is that you were successful because you made assumptions which were quite correct. And you were able to make these assumptions fairly correctly because you understand these 50 students very, very well. And that's the key. The moment you start to increase your target customer base, for example, from your class to your entire school. Now, in a school of, let's say, 1,000 people, probably very few people outside your class you know well. If you further expand it to all the schools in the district, then probably there are different kinds of a school in the mix. Now, they're your school kind of schools, but maybe there are different. There are government, public, private, English medium, Hindi medium, regional language medium, all sorts of things kind of starts happening. So effectively what happens is that if I draw on an XY axis, where on the X axis, on the Y axis, I draw the different classes of students. So this is basically your class. Your customers are constituted by the students in your class. Here, your customer base consists of all the students in your school. Here, your customer base consists of all the students of all the schools in your district, so on and so forth, your state, and maybe entire pan India. So you are increasing the number of customers. So you're increasing your customer base. Now on the x-axis, I'm representing how accuracy of your assumptions about your customer base. Now you can imagine that, because of your proximity with your classmates, your assumptions are really, really accurate. But as you increase, you go to your, expand your customer base to your entire school, the accuracy of your assumption decreases. As you go to district, probably your assumptions are even weaker, and weaker as you go to state, and even weaker as you go to pan India. And that's the thing, that's the problem, because now you might be making castles in the air because your assumptions are probably very, very far from the reality. Your ability to know and understand the students at the pan India level or at state level is going to be extremely hard. And the path to this pan-India level starts somewhere with a few students somewhere. It's like a dozen students, 50 students, 100 students. Your growth has to happen in this way. And therefore, you need to focus. And my advice would be to think about and start with the smallest subset of customers that you can think of and succeed there. Effectively, you should think about like, in terms of like how to acquire my first 5 customers, how to acquire my next 50 customers, how to acquire my next 500 customers. And you should move from one to the other only once you have exhausted that acquisition attempt, either in two of the ways. One, you successfully acquired most of those customers. That's great. You can move to the next one. Or you failed, but it was a no stone unturned failure. You tried everything and finally you concluded, and you have strong reasons to decide that this was not a good segment, and therefore you are going to go to other segment, and most likely you should choose another similar small segment, succeed there, and then go on to larger segments. All right, so the first and core element is that basically narrowly define your customer base and maniacally focus on them. Once you focus on them, your likelihood of having success is much greater, rather than just increase theoretically your customer base without much understanding. So that's one major component of your business model. There can be many other, but I'll only touch upon a few of these. And the second important one is the pricing. Now, I'll give you a general model of pricing to help you think in a structured way about pricing. And then I will talk in particular about some unique models which have come in the digital world. So when you think about pricing, the things that we talked about over here, there are many variables and many things, but if you basically summarize this, all of that can be captured in a simple model. And what is that model? Well, whenever you have a product, you spend some cost in building that product or giving that service or whatever it may be. And then there is some willingness of people to pay. That's a technical term that I'm using it, but probably this is the only one. What is willingness to pay? If I basically go and try, if I look at something, it serves a purpose for me without any other information. If I say that, okay, I'll be happy paying 100 rupees for this thing, then that's my willingness to pay for that thing. It could be actually, available for $50, 50 rupees, or it could be available for 150 rupees. So the price could be very different from the willingness to pay. But as a business person, you want to keep your price somewhere between this willingness to pay and this cost. And effectively, this price minus cost, so this one is your profit, as you can imagine. And this is the value you created for your customers. They bought it because they got some benefits out of it. And the benefit that they, if you have to put in money terms, this is what it will look like. Now, this profit into number of customers is equal to total profit. And this is what you are interested in. You are not interested in just extracting maximum price from just one or two of your products, but in fact, you want to put the price something which is going to maximize this multiplication. So if you have to do this, now there are quite a few ways of doing it. First way, the obvious one, is that reduce the cost. If you reduce the cost, then the profit increases, your total profit increases. The second one is to increase the price. But suppose you basically moved your price from here to here. What happened? The perceived value that your customers are now getting from your product has reduced. And with that, what happens? Most likely, the number of customers who are ready to buy it now, that goes down. So it's related. So typically, you don't only think about increasing the price, but rather you try to increase both these things. You actually try to increase the willingness to pay itself. This is your new willingness to pay. How do you do that? You typically add more features, make it easier for people to use these things, give them more delight or something like that. And at that point of time, you can more easily increase your price. So then that is the third way to increase your overall profit. And fourth, clearly, is to increase the number of customers who pay for your thing. So effectively, if I go back to this model, then here what you did is that you kept the price very high. So very few people had, the value that was perceived by the customers. There were very few who saw the value of that one. And therefore, the number of customers was 3. When you reduce the price, the value that people were getting, the number of people who were getting the value itself and the number of people that increased, and therefore you had that multiplication factor, the total profit that increased. And here it's a similar instance over here, though it has its unique elements. Now, one of the new kind of models that has come up is effectively the situation that has been created in the technology or the digital world, which is very different from the traditional model of product pricing, where your willingness to pay is 0. What do you do now? People don't want to pay anything. And effectively, that's the model which probably, a lot of you might be considering or might be in the close vicinity of that. So the model where basically the product itself is free, willingness to pay is equal to 0. Now, again, there are many, many models in this area as well. The most typical ones that you might have seen is effectively to use your data in one way or the other. Some apps just make that data available in anonymous or other forms to some other organizations who are interested in getting that data. Ads is effectively just one way of making use of that data, this time for targeting the ads by various organizations. So ads anyway is a big pool where a lot of multinational organizations have huge budget for ads. The top 10 customers each have, like top 10 FMCG companies, they have upwards of $5 billion in ad expenditure every year. So a lot of these organizations like WhatsApp and Facebook and all, they basically go for this model, or Google. The second one is that you effectively give the software itself free, but you charge for any kind of customization or support. Now, this model is generally not very common in consumer internet, but this is more in what I call as enterprise, where companies, when they buy software. And a good example of this one is if you have heard about Linux, that's an operating system, then Red Hat is a company. And effectively, this Linux software itself is free. You can download it today and use it. In fact, Red Hat company also provides it. However, this software is used by a large number of organizations to run their very critical pieces of software, their CRM, customer relationship management, their business systems, and so on and so forth. And therefore, they go to Red Hat for a couple of reasons. They say that, hey, you need to customize it. We need special security packages. We operate in this kind of hardware. So Red Hat actually goes ahead and makes Linux more usable for organizations. And if something goes wrong, businesses cannot wait. Businesses have to kind of, if their system where they are running their maybe software trading systems, it goes down, it's a big problem. So companies like Red Hat also provide support. So that's another one, but probably that's not a big interest to you guys, at least at this point of time. Then there is another model, which is freemium, which is quite common. And here what happens is that you effectively make the core thing free. So for example, you can say one of the freemium models that you can apply in this example could be that, hey, you can buy up to 3 nodes, or you can get up to 3 nodes free. But for the 4th one onward, I'll start charging. So people get to try it, they see that there's a value, and then for some kind of extra benefits, ability to buy more nodes or to basically have some advanced feature, you have to start paying. That's basically freemium model. A lot of you might be aware of that as well. And finally, there is subscription. And in fact, if I go back to this one, this is effectively very similar to a subscription model. In this one, there's various shades of subscription model as well, but effectively, what you are getting here is some kind of annual revenue. And this is the model which a lot of times organizations prefer these days. This has definitely become a very dominant model of the digital and technology world. And in fact, if in today's world, if you're earning $100 by a one-time apps, payment, if you basically earn 100 rupees in this model versus 100 rupees in a subscription model, you are generally valued more for subscription model. You are considered better because you have a subscription model. And the reason are simple. What happens here is that in a one-time transaction, you have transacted and it's over. The customer is probably not coming back to you unless maybe he needs the next version of your app or some major features which are only available in the latest feature. They're not going to come back to you. You have very little control, very little points where you can kind of, intervene and tell the customer that, hey, use this, use that, or something like that. It doesn't happen so much. You have less control, less things to move around to adjust your business model. In a subscription model, similar to like this one, what happens? If you put your price of rupees 5, but you found that, well, not many people are actually buying it, then maybe you can reduce it to 4 and you can get probably more students to buy it. You can play around. You can play around with the pricing. And besides, in this kind of a model, people have to come back because the subscription, it is basically by definition based on times. Like subscription is for a time, just like for magazine, it's not forever. And therefore, there is like a forced checkpoint, a forced meeting point at which you will interact with the customer once again, each time in the year. And therefore, this is the model which is often preferred by a lot of technology companies these days. So there are also many other models, premiums and things like those, but roughly these are the 4 models available. Typically, the ones most valued these days are the subscription one, and therefore, if you are trying to kind of get to that one, that's something that will be much better, and you will have much more control on your business model. Okay, I'll actually now talk briefly about 2 aspects and close it. I think we are running out of time, so in the next 5 to 7 minutes, I'll talk about 2 key aspects of business models. One aspect is to focus on understanding why. Well, in this example, you expected based on your assumption to have 10,000 rupees in revenue. You actually got 12,000, very good. But in fact, how do you know that you could not have earned more? You shouldn't be too happy just because you have met your goals. In fact, one of your key duties towards your business model is to understand why. Why did more people pay you? Why did more notes get sold? Why did more notes came into the market or your platform? Try to understand why. And while it should be done in both the situations. Whether you succeeded with your business model, like in this case, you should still delve deeper and deeper. Why? Because the business model needs to evolve. You are successful today, this year, but next year the situation might be different. And if you understand the why, you will be able to evolve it to continuously be success. But if you don't, then it's just a matter of luck. Next year you may or may not be successful. And certainly if you have failed in your business model this year, instead of 12,000, you made, let's say, just 5,000 rupees, then in that case, you have to think even harder. You have obvious reason, and hopefully you delve into it, because only then, once you delve deeper and deeper into it and identify the root cause for success or failure, you will be able to evolve it to the next level in the next iteration. And in fact, business model is not like a black box, and it's not like one entity. There are parts of business models which you, when you reason about, you will understand that yes, this part of business model is successful. There are parts of the business model which are not successful, and therefore you should change those parts and not the one which are working. You should not just, throw away your entire business model. There must be something which must be working fine, and you want to keep it. Want to keep that as a kernel and build on top of that layer by layer. So that's why understanding why is super important. And finally, I will end by actually asking you to basically change your mental model about your business models. And what I mean is that instead of looking for successes and rather mild successes, look for spectacular failures. Well, what I mean by this, set up ambitious goals. If you set up 10,000 rupees goal and you got 12,000, you might be very happy and you are moderately successful. But what if somehow you understand, or you uh, realize at some point of time that actually the opportunity was of 1 lakh rupees, but you only ended up with 12? Then will you consider yourself to be successful? Probably not. So the idea is that you effectively don't settle down for mild successes. You set up really aggressive, really hard to achieve goals. You'll most likely fail and fail often, but at the end result will be better in multiple directions. Number one, most likely instead of 12,000 rupees, you will make more. So in absolute terms, you will actually be earning more. Yes, you probably failed to earn 1 lakh, you only got 50,000 rupees, but it is much more than 12,000 rupees. That's number one. Number two, when you actually fail to get 1 lakh, you get stuck on 50,000, you think harder and you learn more in that process. And when you continuously do this, effectively you are exponentially rising. So most likely if you are setting up you're setting yourself for mild successes, you are growing in some kind of a linear path and you are happy about it, this is what your growth path will look like. But if you set yourself for spectacular failure, then most likely you will grow in an exponential way. And the reason is because you're maximizing the opportunity, you're maximizing the learning each time you are failing, and not leaving anything on the table that you could not have achieved. You have tried as hard as you could. You made the business run and give you as much profits as you can. Even after that, you failed. You think hard, you learn, and you set the foundation for your next app, for the next venture, for the next service, which, based on all these experiences, will be set up for much greater success. So, more than anything else, change the mental model that you have for your business model and set your business models so that you repeatedly go and have a spectacular failure, because one day through that spectacular path of or chain of spectacular failures, you will have that one great success which organizations like WhatsApp and Facebook have achieved. If you stick yourself over here, probably you will never see that path. So on that note, I'll stop. I've taken a few more minutes than expected. Varia, do we have time for some question answer here?
Yeah, I think we can quickly go through some questions because there are quite a few interesting ones that we've received.
Awesome.
And I'd like
Sounds
to
good.
start not with the question, but with one of the comments that a student has put, which is actually really profound, which is that I think first you should become a customer and think like it, and then make your product simple. So I thought that was really
Very good point. Yes. Yep.
And that's something we discussed also, the importance of being customer centric while
Yep.
building products.
Yep.
So
Become a
with
customer.
that, I'll start with some of the questions that we have. So the first one is sometimes the customer wishes cannot be connected to the business model that we're thinking about. What to do
Yes.
in such a situation?
Very good question. And that's why basically I say that focus on your customers narrowly and also define the customers you don't want to focus on. Most likely, if that customer is asking for something which is totally disconnected from your business, hear him out, listen to the customer. There may be a point or two, but you have to consciously say no. And the ability to say no is important. You're focused on a given set of customers. You have probably invested and acquired quite a few over there. If somebody is like you know, completely different from this core set of customers, he's asking for something, say no. It's a strong ability, and that will serve you well, rather than the case when you actually just go from one customer to another. If you keep jumping, you have, this core customer set that you want to focus on, but one customer came from this side and you focused on her as well. That another one came from a completely unrelated field, you focused on that too. You will spread yourself very, very thin. And remember, nobody has infinite resources. In fact, startups have very meager amount of resources. You have to think really, really hard. And the ability to say no to those customers and continuously focus on a narrow set of customers is important. So yes, go ahead and say no to that customer.
Great. The next question we have is, sir, business models of softwares which are already available for some softwares have business models which are already available for free. Then why do people buy the same software in the paid version?
Yeah. So, so I'll touch on this one. So as I told you, Linux is completely free. Why do people bought it? I touched upon a few reasons. So the people who are, first of all, if you are running Linux, you need some level of expertise to actually install it. When you actually go and try to use any of these software, you will see that, okay, there is some level of expertise required to even set them up and run it. If something goes wrong in that process, which almost invariably happens because no software is bug free, that's the reality of life. So at that point of time, when there is some issue with this software, what does the enterprise do? Well, Red Hat gives that guarantee to those enterprises that we will look into it and we will fix. And obviously, Red Hat, as the creator of this software or big contributor to this software, has a reputation and the right level of experts. Most likely, they will be able to do that. And then further, there are, so effectively, the reason why it is being used, because the free version, if I can compare, so there is a Linux free version, and then there is a Red Hat Linux version. The enterprise one, first of all, this has got typically low quality, and this has got typically very high quality, fewer bugs and things like those. On top of that, if something goes wrong, there's nobody to support you. There is a community, but then you don't pay the community. People may or may not fix that bug. If it's really important for everybody, it's a very critical security hole or something like that, they will, but otherwise not. Here you have guaranteed support. The other way in which free software companies go ahead and starts to build their what they call as business moat is effectively integrations. What they do is that Microsoft Office may not work here because Microsoft Office never was ported to Linux. Now, somehow Red Hat Linux folks will actually go ahead and port it for the Red Hat Linux, and Microsoft Office can work or work reasonably on this platform. So they do all these integrations, and then it becomes harder for the organizations to leave Red Hat Linux and go back to free version of Linux. So these are some of the reasons why people actually still buy the software which is otherwise available for free. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I think few last questions. One is, what if I want to make money or revenue just through advertisement models? What should I be thinking about?
That's a fairly good model, and I think people build apps to get it, but a lot of times, like these TikTok videos, there are many ways, there are many different kind of things, or from videos to apps to services, a lot of things that people build to kind of latch onto this model. And this is something which is very well supported by the likes of Google. Even if you are a blog writer, you can connect your blog to these AdWords, and then those corresponding ads will come in your blog. Its new form is videos. Now there are TikTok videos coming. You also have apps. when you are thinking about the ad business, then I think the key things to understand is how do these ad businesses run, and you'll have to understand a little bit of the mechanics of this one, uh, in the sense that you have to understand and start making your assumptions, and corresponding to that start making your business model. What are those assumptions? It's like, okay, what is the audience who are or users of your app, how many times they will be using the apps, because those are the opportunities at which you can show the ads. What kind of ads you can show? Will it be like a banner ad, or will it be a video ad? So you start thinking about, okay, what is the usage pattern? And in that usage pattern, what kind of ads fit in? And then what is the price, or like, you're earning for each kind of these ads. So you can create an Excel sheet, you can start, kind of modeling it. You can make a column for users, you can make a column for like number of times, you can make a column for the types of ads, approximate cost that you get. And once you have this kind of spreadsheet filled in, you will have good sense as to what you need to do, how you need to build your app. Maybe you can identify some factors that, hey, I want to have more video ads because the video ads get you the maximum revenue. So then you can choose that, among all these potential rows, you say that, okay, I'm going to target this row, I'm going to target this row, because these are the ones which are likely to get me the maximum revenue. And then you have to start building the features of your app which are geared towards it. So there are, for example, you can build your app in a way where people actually watch something on your app or video. And before people want to watch a video, it's a very fair game to show them a 15-second ad video. So then you want to orient towards app, towards videos, and show and make people watch more and more video. So this is, I mean, this is one very, very high level way, but you need to kind of sit down, probably talk to people who have done this, uh, build this kind of, even more well-defined structure, choose which of these rows you want to maximize for, identify what are the features that will help you do maximize these rows or the revenue coming out of these rows. And that's the way you will go about doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I mean, in general, business models and monetization is such a complex theme. So, um, everything that Santosh has covered, some permutation and combination of it would make sense for your case, not just the broad categories or buckets in themselves.
Right.
So maybe go through the video again. As you go through it, think about your product, your digital venture, and see what components make the most sense for you, and sort of put them all together. I think we can take our final question and then wrap up the session for today, which is, if our business model is always evolving and changing, how do we make sure that the business in itself stays stable?
By actually evolving with your customers and with the ecosystem that you are in. So I mean, first of all, no business remains stable forever. Every organization that I have worked for thus far, I'll tell you that businesses actually almost never grow in a linear path from here to there. Hey, Gloria, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Something came on my browser. Okay. So what I was saying is that businesses almost never evolve in a linear path. If you work, look closely, businesses typically grow in a step functions. What happens is that no matter what kind of business model they have made, it works for a little bit, but then it stops working. And at that point of, and in fact, organizations kind of continue to be in the same way in which they are operating. And then this are suddenly jolted into like, oh, I mean, a lot of water has passed under the bridge. And then they go and evolve their business model, redo a lot of things, and they are again on this path. But it's their nature. Once things start going well, people forget it and people stop like, evolving or make some mistakes. And again, they start like slowing down. And then once again, they realize it. And I'll give you one example, a concrete example from Facebook. Facebook did very, very well until 2010, 2011. But then they had the IPO and they were not valued well. Why? Because around this time, phones took over. Lot more people moved to phones. They started using social media and everything on phone, and Facebook did not have that mod. They did not have a app for the phones, and therefore suddenly they realized that, oh my God, we are totally focused on web browsers, and people have vanished from web browsers. The number of people who are coming and the time that they are spending on web browsers has been going down. So if we don't change our business model at this point of time, we are going to die soon. So effectively, and I was like, I joined Facebook about 6-8 months after this happened. Mark Zuckerberg just declared that we have to build an app and everything will first go in the phone app rather than on the browser. He completely blocked it where all the development was going on. And then suddenly Facebook's graph kind of went up and up and up. And then once again, there was like, there were similar crises which have always come. From a distance, it looks like, oh, Facebook is this one giant which has continuously grown. But having worked there, I know that almost invariably, as a clockwork, every 2-3 years, there is a situation which is an existential crisis for the business. So, my friend, don't aim for a stability in the business. It will be elusive, you will never attain it. Rather, make sure that you are keeping your eyes and ears open to identify these trends, these changing scenarios, your assumptions, and keep evolving the business. Sometimes you will get it right, sometimes you will not get it right, but as long as you are very, very adaptable, more or less, you will be in a trajectory which is like mostly upward. So, that's my kind of take at it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Santosh, for doing this session. This has been super helpful for all students. And I'm sure as they start with week 4, this will give them a lot of guidance and insights to think and build their respective business models. Just on this note, for all the students who are watching, the details and information for week 4 are up on the Tinkerpreneur Bootcamp. You can log in, go through all the content and resources that we have curated, and get started on this week's assignment and learning adventure. So once again, thank you everyone for joining in, and I'll see you for the next session that we have tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure giving this session, and it is always like a learning experience for me too. So thanks for all the questions and your engagement. Thank you.